Thank you for joining us at this time. You're watching news analysis live on Politics and Business TV. The top stories. Ondo State government deploys personnel of Amotekun to Ekiti State. Central Bank of Nigeria directs banks to limit net open position of foreign currency assets and liabilities to 20% of shareholders' funds. International Monetary Fund attributes high inflation to the level of hardship in Nigeria. Details coming up shortly. Good afternoon. I am Omoife Peace of Semere. Now, as part of efforts to secure the release of 6 kidnapped school children, 3 teachers and the driver, the Ondo State Governor Lucky Aiyedatiwa has ordered the deployment of security outfit codenamed Amotekun to Ekiti State. Well, Commander of the security outfit, Adetunji Adele, who disclosed this while parading 31 suspected criminals arrested in the state, added that 100 of its personnel have been deployed. The deployment came as Ekiti Council of Traditional Rulers urged Governor Biodun Oyebanji to empower them to secure their domains. A clamor the Oni of Ife, Oba Ade Ogunwusi, endorsed, arguing that community policing was the surest way out of the insecurity menace. Now, a former Minister of Defense, Ali Gusau, has attributed the rising cases of insecurity to Nigeria's complex nature, stressing that the nation is too complex to be secured by the police alone. This was as a chieftain of the People's Democratic Party, Olabode George, says Nigeria has found itself grappling with a dangerous situation following the recent spike in kidnappings in the country. Gusau, speaking on Wednesday at the Community Protection Guard graduation ceremony, a community-based security outfit said, established by the Zamfara state government, said there was a need to rethink the country's security strategy. Anyway, from security matters now, the Minister of Power, Bayo Adelabu, has listed unpaid debt and low gas supply as some of the reasons for the inability of power plants to operate to capacity. Adelabu stated this when he visited the Olorunshogo power plant in Papalanto, Ogun State, and the Omotosho plant in Ondo State. According to media reports, the 2 government power plants being managed by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company was inspected by the minister, who said the tour was part of his nationwide visit to power installations of the federal government to inspect and monitor the physical state and operational state of these power plants. The minister, who expressed satisfaction with the size and the technology of the Olorunshogo and Omotosho power plants, however, lamented the level of underutilization of these power installations. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria has ordered banks to limit the net open position (NOP) of their foreign currency assets and liabilities to 20% of shareholders' funds. The directive was contained in a circular jointly signed by the Director of Trade and Exchange, Dr. Hassan Mahmoud, as well as Rita CK for Director of Banking Supervision, titled Harmonization of Reporting Requirements on Foreign Currency Exposures of Banks. The directive, which is in a move to further boost liquidity in the foreign exchange market, is expected to shore up the fortunes of Nigeria or Naira in the foreign exchange market while curtailing excessive trading and possible abuses by dealers. Meanwhile, the Naira reportedly traded sideways yesterday, depreciating in the parallel market while appreciating in the official market. You're watching news analysis live on Politics and Business TV. Still to come, Nigerian Labour Congress says 200,000 Naira minimum wage earlier proposed to the federal government is no longer realistic considering the country's current economic situation. A political economist, Aliyu Elias, would be assessing the demands made by NLC and probably peg an amount for a decent minimum wage. This and more after the break. Do join us again. Right, welcome back. You're watching news analysis live on Politics and Business TV. Now, the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, has revealed that the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is investigating the former minister, Hadi Sirika, over the controversial Nigeria Air deal. Keyamo said no local airline would be designated as a national airline, stressing that a proper national carrier would be established. It would be recorded that in August last year, shortly after he was sworn in as minister, Keyamo, a senior advocate of Nigeria, SAN, faulted the deal by Sirika and suspended the whole arrangement to enable a proper audit of contracts. Nigeria Air was unveiled days before the end of the administration of former President Muhammadu Buhari. In the meantime, Chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Ola Olukoyede, has revealed that the anti-graft agency traced the sum of 7 billion naira suspected to be proceeds of money laundering to a religious organization. He said another religious group was found to be laundering money for terrorists. The EFCC chairman made the revelation at the Musa Yaradua Center, Abuja, during a one-day dialogue on youth, religion, and the fight against corruption. He said some of the religious organizations, institutions, sects, and bodies in the country had been found to be aiding and abetting fraudsters and terrorists. Now let's talk other matters, as the International Monetary Fund has attributed high inflation to the level of hardships in the country. The Division Chief Research Department, Daniel Lair, disclosed this at the fund's press briefing for its January 2024 Outlook update. Lair noted that current reforms in the country have led to currency depreciation. According to him, the weakening of the naira has contributed to the increase in inflation, stressing that bringing down inflation must become a top priority for the country. Lair declared that while conquering inflation through monetary tightening, the country must also provide social support through its budget. Now, the Nigeria Labour Congress has said that 200,000 naira minimum wage it earlier proposed to the federal government was no longer a situation. The Congress, which spoke through its national vice president, Tommy Etim, was reacting to Tuesday's inauguration of the minimum wage committee by Vice President Kashim Shettima. He said, and I quote, "You are aware that when we opted for the 200,000 naira, the socio-economic challenges were not as biting as they are now. And when you now look at the exchange rate, it was not what it is now. The naira rate not being devalued as it is now. So 200,000 naira is no longer tenable." End of quote. Meanwhile, President of NLC, Joe Ajaero, has criticized the selection process of state governors drafted as members of the 37-member tripartite committee on minimum wage. Ajaero noted that most of the governors in the minimum wage committee are those who are not paying minimum wage or paying them in breaches. The Vice President, Kashim Shettima, had inaugurated the committee at the Council Chamber of the Presidential Villa, Abuja, saying the decision was aimed at ensuring a decent living wage and in compliance with the existing National Minimum Wage Act of 2019, which will expire in a few months. However, a chairman of the tripartite committee on a new minimum wage, Buka Goni Aji, has said that the new wage would be based on what prevails in the country's West African neighbors. Goni, in his remarks after the inauguration of the committee, affirmed that its members would come up with a fair, practical, implementable, and sustainable minimum wage. Now, joining us to discuss this is a political economist, Aliyu Elias. He's live in the studios. Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
All right. I must also say Happy New Month because, I mean, it's February 1st.
Right.
January has come and gone.
Right.
One would say hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
All right. Now, it looks like we're going to be starting the new month, on a quite dramatic, note or setting. Because again, NLC is at it. Before now, the NLC had said that if there's going to be any form of negotiation with the federal government with regards to minimum wage, it has to be in tandem with the economic reality on ground. Now, the NLC is saying that the 200,000 naira it had earlier proposed, it is no longer tenable. But what would you say changed, since the conversation around 30,000 naira minimum wage started? Let's take it from there.
Well, I quite agree with NLC because they are going on a bargaining situation, and when you are going on bargaining, you must go with a kind of balance that will make you to have been able to. So practically, we knew that the 200,000 they negotiated before. They plan to negotiate is not realistic at that time. That I'm sure government would definitely bring it more down. But now that the economy is much more difficult and much more harder, I think it's quite instructive for them to say no. We want more than this that we have said before, because it's quite. If you look at a family of 4, family of 5, they can hardly survive with 30,000 naira in a week. So if you look at it very well, to have a balanced one, it will still over around that 200,000 naira. So for me, I think it's a good one, and we should also say thank you to government for bringing this committee together, because they can as well say we increase, then they suspend it. But because of the 2019 agreement passed by the National Assembly, every 5 years these wages will be reviewed. So it's a good one, but our economy is not a good one now. So I don't know how government is going to come out. Perhaps I also listen to the issue of to pay that money. If you look at most of our governors, majority of them did not even pay that 30,000, let alone now thinking of it. So I agree with you. And if you listen to that conversation itself in that meeting, a particular governor came out and said subnational may not have the power to pay. It's quite very funny that we not even start negotiating. They're not talking about you may not be able to pay. That's quite a fearful one.
Well, what are the major factors, why the cost of living is really, high in recent times?
Well, if you ask me, cost of living in Nigeria, a lot of things are negative. If you look at our inflation, you see that the inflation rate is quite high. And what is even driving the inflation? You agree with me that it is food driven inflation. So, and if you look at our present agency on food security, but up to now we still having a serious issue. That perhaps he also said there will be all-round farming, right? Now all-round farming is also coming. So there's a lot of problems. So if you also look at security is also a problem that we must look at. Nigeria's security is contributing immensely to our cost of living. People go to farm, they cannot even go back to harvest what they know. They have to pay some people, that non-state actors, to be able to access their farm. So it becomes a serious issue.
Well, so much to talk about with
so much to talk about.
At the same time, some economists have also brought in this conversation around the unification of the exchange rate as to, the major reason, if you like, why the cost of living is so high in the country. But how do you attribute the exchange rate to the living standard of an average Nigerian on the street? Right.
If you ask me right from the beginning, I think about some things that are not supposed to bring. You bring two variables at the same time. You remove first subsidy and you also float the naira. And you do not have an absorber that can actually keep that. So if you ask me, the two coming together is a problem. For instance, look at exchange rate. There's nothing you want to buy in Nigeria, in Africa, that you does not have relationship with dollar or foreign currency rather. So it's like that. So there's nothing we can do. If you want to calculate anything, the only thing we have for our foreign exchange is in oil, and we also calculate in dollars, and that's why it's quite increasing.
Okay, so for someone who is selling pepper and tomatoes in the market,
right?
How do you attribute that to?
Thank you. It has it because that person also buy from one person, the person also buy from another person, and that's how it moves. So you don't say because I'm trading with only you now that other things does not concern me. People that you things come together to affect the economy. So it's not about what you do only. Only you cannot transact with 2%. You have to do other things, engage other people in the business. So by so doing, it have what we call it, a multiplier effect on it.
Okay. I think lately there's been a conversation around living wage and minimum wage. Can you please, talk us through? Is there really any difference between minimum wage and living wage?
Well, as at the time you agree on living wage, it becomes a minimum wage. Okay. Because that's how it actually works. Because now if we end up agreeing on 150,000 naira, as at the time they agree, it becomes a minimum. When you say minimum, that means somebody at level 4 or in ministry, that's what the minimum, that's what they will get. So it's also minimum. But perhaps when we now say minimum wage, the current minimum wage is not sustainable again for a living wage.
Yeah. Okay. And also we understand that the current minimum wage of 30,000 naira that has a lot of controversy surrounding it, it is nothing to write home about, as we also understand that the bag of rice is even above, is higher than the minimum wage, and it's really, really laughable, one would say. But will it be intelligent to say the demands of NLC in terms of minimum wage are quite unrealistic? 200,000 naira that was proposed before now. We understand at the time the free fall of the naira had not gotten to this level, but isn't 200,000 naira outrageous? The
demand of NLC to get 200,000 naira before now was outrageous.
Okay.
But now it's apt. The only fear now we have now is that, when you are thinking about the federal government staff, you're thinking about state, you have to also look at private, organized private sector.
Does this even rub off on the private sector?
Correct. That's it now. Because once you are paid civil servant 200,000 minimum wage, the private sector that pay 120, we have to change, because you also go to the same market. So it has that effect on it. So for me, and I'm happy that even the committee also constitutes private sector, federal government, state government. The only thing I would demand for them is that they should also add pensioners to it. When you bring them also, it also affects them, because you can't say that you have agreed on minimum wage and you leave pensioner behind. So I say they will continue to collect what they are still collect. So these are the things we need. So I think they should bring them on. So they will also have, after you've done that, they will also come back and say you just have to change on to. So that's it. So for me, if you ask me, the range at which we should look at is between 150 to 200,000 naira. But for the major issue is subnationals. Subnational will find it difficult to pay. And another major issue that we are not looking at is this decision in the budget. Has our 2024 budget covers the proposed increments? Have they actually worked on it? So if we agree 150,000 now, 200,000, where is the money coming from? For the national and for the subnational. So perhaps they can agree on it and they will say, let's start implementing it in 2025. What's your problem?
Another journey is upon us. I mean, one is just assuming, but taking a look at, the antecedents of the federal government, one would fear that that is most likely going to be the route that would have to follow at the end of the day. But what outcome do you see emanating from this tripartite committee on a new minimum wage in terms of negotiations with the relevant stakeholders? Because as it stands, the NLC is already in doubt.
Right.
And then we know that over time, when the NLC have had reasons to negotiate with the federal government, the NLC comes out to tell us, this is what happened, and then the federal government is saying another thing. So there is always a disparity.
Right. So my first challenge is the vice president. If you recall, vice president said they want this report to come before end of March. That's quite a challenging one. You want a committee that is starting now, let's assume today, you want the report by end of March. So the problem now lies on the body language of the Goniaba Aji, the chairman. So because when you talk about negotiation is a very tough thing to do. You come from a particular level, NLC is also coming from a particular level. You have to strike a balance. At what point are we going to agree? And remember, NLC is also complaining already. One, that the earlier proposed 200,000 is not tenable again. They're also saying that those subnationals, those state governors that you put there are not even the right people to be there, because they failed to pay the minimum wage of 30,000 and they are still paying 18,000. So I think it's quite bad. But Nigeria is there. We are all there to really see how it it will go. I'm convinced that the federal government is ready to increase the minimum wage. But the question is that are they going to increase to the level of what labor is expecting? That is the question.
Okay, so for you already put the peg or the price, tag at 150 to 200,000.
150 to 200,000 is realistic, because when you say minimum wage, it does not mean that people at level 6, 7 will get that. It's the minimum. So when you say the minimum, or a family of 5 this period, he will pay school fees, he will do transportation, he will buy food and all that. So if you look at all these things together, I think the minimum should not be less than 150,000. So I'm living in between 150,000 and 200,000. And my fear is always for the private sector. We don't look at them. Let's just look at this analysis. The employee of federal government and state government, I am not sure is up to 10 million. So private sector employ over 100 million. So if you are making decision for this 10 million and you are allowing 100 million to what's off, is a problem. So they should give that private sector committee or people that from private sector that are there the opportunity to actually consult as well, because beyond that meeting they also have to go back to their constituency and consult further. Should we do this? What is better? I'm sure the private sector have their own consultative approach too. So I think that is the way forward. But we must come to the table not because of only civil servants, but with the generality of people under employment.
You made a very vital point there, talking about the need for the private sector to be carried along. But over the years, because there's been this conversation as to, oh, you're not buying from a different market, we'll all go to the same market to buy, right? Whether you're a civil servant or you're working in the private sector. But then at the end, there seems to be an absence of proper checks and balance.
Right.
So even after negotiations, the private sector, they go back to their various constituencies, just like you said, and little or nothing is, affected.
Right.
How are we supposed to hold these people to account? What kind of conversations should people in the private sector be having?
Well, like I said, it has ripple effect. That any decision multiplier effect. They are two different things. Now, if you look at the markets now, a market woman is there listening, and they said no. Now it is now their salary is now 150,000 naira. It's just common sense that he or she also want to take his own profit, because they actually approach the same market. We think because I buy from you, they also pay school fees, they also pay transport. And looking at the Nigeria economy now, I think the need to carry along private sector is very, very key, because private sector even contribute the more. Let's look at MSME. MSME employ over 85% of Nigerians. So if you look at that sector is still struggling, and you are saying that sector should come and pay 250,000 naira, and that's why I said there is need to carry this stakeholder along. Also, not because of 10 million Nigerians who are working for federal government and state government and make a decision that will affect the generality of Nigerians. And labor also, I'm sure labor also is not only labor for federal government, they're also coming from different category of labor organs, because I know they're affiliated to different labor organs. So I think for me, they should consult wide. My fear is that we'll match the visible. Are we going to implement that minimum wage this year? That's another question for conversation. Well,
the federal government under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has indeed set a lot of things for execution, next month. That's March of 2024. Of course, last year when the president addressed in one of the nationwide broadcasts, he also said the CNG buses, will be rolled out at least March this year. So the expectations are indeed high. But, to wrap up the conversation, when we talk about the cost of living, what exactly would you say? I mean, let's put the aspect of, the policies that the federal government, had introduced, from unifying the exchange rate to removing fuel subsidy that has brought about, some level of hardship. Let's talk about price control, because it looks like the price of foodstuff and other essentials, they keep skyrocketing on a daily basis. Is that the making of the government as well? If you ask me, I will recall that
federal government, when they float the naira, they said now it is willing buyer and willing seller. So Nigeria market is open to willing buyer and willing seller.
That
so
makes
now
it more complicated.
Make it more complicated, and that's why federal government needs to come in, because the statement willing buyer, willing seller is a problem. Now, if you recall, President Tinubu said he has declared state of emergency in what? In food. Yeah. The major problem Nigerians are facing now is cost of food. very, very high. And we look at the reasons. It's what we have been managing since 10 years. Insecurity, right? You know, insecurity is a problem. So we must tackle insecurity so as to plan for a better Nigeria. So without food on people's table, it becomes a problem. And now, if you now increase salary, it does not really mean that it's going to reduce the problem in Nigeria. You must solve the major problem.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we just have to leave the conversation here now because of time, but you should take note. I mean, at the end of, you know, this whole negotiation,
right,
and the federal government says, look, 150,000 is not even realistic for us. Of course, that will give us something to chew on and also form, you know, new conversations on the show. We definitely will come back to you for more analysis. Much for always, you know, being available to analyze, you know, these economic issues. Ali Elias is a political economist. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Right, and that's it for news analysis today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Omoife Piso Semere. I'll be back at the top of the hour with the news update. Good afternoon.